Is it illegal for me to import my hedgehogs to a multitude of places, but it's totally legal to import thousands upon thousands of fighting-age economic migrants?
You can't import hedgehogs or any number of plant or animal life forms because they carry unique threats to the biodiversity of a region. They are a threat to the indigenous plant and animal life in the areas you are trying to import them to. Immigrants are people. We're still cool with that, right? Immigrants are people? And what the fuck do you mean by fighting age economic migrant? Is that a person of a certain age who moves to a new country for economic purposes? Is your problem here with immigration or your inability to import life forms for pleasure and profit? Because a libertarian government isn't going to crack down on those fighting-aged migrants. If you recall from last time, the libertarians raised a lot of good questions. Unfortunately, because of their dogmatic adherence to pure libertarian philosophies, most of those questions posed can be answered simply by conceding that government isn't perfect. The fact remains that it is still a better alternative than what the libertarians have to offer. Let's see if they do any better this round.
If it's wrong for you to do a certain thing, can you, by voting, make it right for someone else to do the exact same thing?
Are we talking legally wrong, morally wrong, what? Because legally, it is wrong for me to act as the judge, jury, and executioner when a crime is committed against me. This is because I cannot be impartial in the judgment process and don't have the authority to implement the punishment. That is why we have created a motherfucking social contract to give us an elected body that has the legal authority to be the judge, jury, and executioner on our behalf. This is what allows society to function.
If the competitive market ingenuity of capitalism can deliver us things like iPhones, 3D printers, and private spaceships, why should services as important as justice, roads, and defense be monopolized by the state?
This is a terribly constructed false comparison. It's the tragedy of the commons all over again. If there is a neighborhood with 10 people living in it, and only 9 people pay for the roads to be maintained and for police protection, then that 10th person gets all the benefits of those services without paying a dime. In very small situations, this issue can be addressed. But in Seattle, for instance, where there are approximately 650,000 people living on a landmass that roughly covers 83 square miles, privatized police forces, privatized fire departments, and privatized roads are not possible. If a fire starts in private fire department A's area of operation, it will spread and possibly cause damage to all the surrounding private fire department areas of operation. When you have a public fire department, when a fire starts in area A, all nearby fire departments come to help. This minimizes the damage done to Area A and is the best way to prevent damage from being done to the surrounding areas. Privatizing some governmental functions is not practical. Just because it can be done doesn't mean it should be done.
Swing statists. When you're opposing gun laws, you argue the government shouldn't be so powerful that it can disarm the populace. So why, when it comes to drug laws, do you argue the government should be so powerful that it can tell people what they can put into their own bodies?
Personally, I'm in favor of stricter gun laws. I think we should abide by the Second Amendment, both the main clause and the subordinate clause. Citizens should not be allowed to own firearms unless they are a part of a well-regulated militia. This includes basic military training, mandatory duty, serving the people in a role similar to the National Guard, and surrendering their firearms if they don't comply with militia rules and regulations or choose to leave the militia. When it comes to the drugs people can put into their system, we have addressed this question already. Remember the tweaker who stumbled onto the road after getting high in his basement? The one who ate another person's face? There is nothing wrong with imbibing drugs. It's what people do while they are on drugs that is the problem. Yes, I think the government goes too far. Yes, I think the regulations are too strict and the punishments are too harsh. But you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. You have no better solution.
Now, to statists of the right, claim you're opposed to socialism and don't see government as the answer, and yet invariably you're celebrating the cops, the first responders, and the fire departments, and the jails, war, all big public sector programs. It's a kind of the socialism that you love. Why do you think that that's going to work better than the private sector?
Why do you think that if you ask questions like a condescending prick, we won't have an answer for you? There are certain roles that the private sector is less well equipped to handle than the government. Like the fire department example from before. Instead of crafting an arrogant veneer of superiority, why don't you try crafting a legitimate question?
If people are innately good, what is the need for government? And if people are innately evil, what is to stop them using government to cause evil to one another? And would it not be better that their influence be limited to that which they can achieve voluntarily, rather than to give them the added benefit of legitimised force?
If people are inherently good, we still need the government to protect our rights and personal property from those few individuals who deviate from the normal and are evil and selfish. If people are inherently evil and selfish, then we create documents like the Constitution to regulate only certain powers to them when they become part of the government, so that they can't abuse it. If we limit an individual only to that which they can achieve voluntarily, you create a society known as anarchy, where might makes right. I would much rather give up certain rights to the state than wake up every morning wondering if my neighbor's gonna run me over with a motherfucking tank so that he can turn my backyard into a swimming pool.
A major question that I have for proponents of state economic regulations in particular is how exactly can you sleep at night?
Well, I sleep at night with a pillow under my head and a cat on top of my feet, usually. Thanks for asking.
Knowing the economic destruction that you have created, the effect of government regulations on output has been calculated to have an accumulated reduction cost on the American GDP of nearly $40 trillion just since 1949. In other words, absent of any federal economic regulations, after World War II, we could have tripled our GDP. Every citizen could have an average income of $333,000 instead of $53,000, a $277,000 increase in the average income. This doesn't even factor in the cost of compliance, rent-seeking, and state-level regulations. We could have had so much more prosperity and so much less poverty without state regulations on our economy. So how can you look your opponents in the eye and claim that your regulations are somehow for the common man?
Now, I'm going to ask for a citation here. Not because I believe you're making these facts and figures up or trying to be dishonest, but because I want to know what statist policies you're referring to. Are you taking into account the drastic change in how government and society interact after World War II due to the economic conditions like the Great Depression? Does this take into account the massive arms race we had with the Soviet Union during the Cold War? Are you factoring in the trillions of dollars spent to fund NASA? Do your numbers address that part of the issue is because we stopped trading with countries who employed slave labor, or that we had a trade embargo with Iraq when Saddam Hussein was committing human rights violations? Does the research factor in that since World War II, the United States has used its economy to fight battles around the world instead of putting soldiers on the ground? I ask for a citation here because you created one statistic by compiling selective data that fits your narrative. So yes, I sleep well at night because while I may not be as wealthy now as I could have been, that trade-off may have saved more than one human life.
Left-wing statists. When you're opposing drug laws, especially weed, you argue the government shouldn't be so powerful that it can tell people what they can and can't put into their own bodies. So why, when it comes to gun laws, do you think the government should be so powerful that it can have a complete monopoly over effective force?
We get it, dude. You like drugs, and the government overregulates drugs. The government isn't perfect. Hell, it may not even be good, but at a bare minimum, it is a necessary evil. Now lay off the drugs and actually think about what you just asked. You think that individuals should be able to put whatever they want into their bodies. Okay, that's fine. And because of this, you think that people should also be able to use whatever effective force they want to. Jesus fuck, that is stupid. Hey guys, I'm gonna load up my body with some drugs and then go use force wherever I see fit. That seems like a safe society to live in. But even setting the drugs aside, do you honestly believe that people should have the right to physically impose their rights on someone else?
Here are the things you can't do without government permission. Build a house, drive a car, own a gun, go fishing, collect rainwater, hunt, cross the road, get married, leave the country, start a business, fly on a commercial plane, take drugs, work. It's actually hard to think of something that doesn't require government permission. Knowing this, how can you say you're free?
I'm free? It's that easy. Not 100%, but that would be pure anarchy. And we'd be right back to my neighbor blowing me up with his tank. So, thank you, social contract, for preserving my freedoms.
If being a democratically elected constitutional republic creates legitimate political authority, does that mean that all the things that were done by the democratically elected constitutional republics of the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, and North Korea, all those things were legitimate and justified?
As to the USSR and Nazi Germany, those are perfect examples of why we have documents like the Constitution. I answered that question for you already. And as for North Korea, I cannot believe you were able to say that with a straight face. Bravo, sir. If you honestly believe that North Korea is a legitimate democratic republic, then there is no hope for you. This is the most intellectually dishonest question I have ever heard. And I've watched BuzzFeed.
If you're a proud, government-loving liberal who champions personal choice, could you please explain why I can't choose to not fund the murder of innocent children abroad?
Sure, but before I do, you want to try that question one more time? Maybe a bit more passive-aggressive? Look, I get it. You don't agree with 100% of what the military is doing. Maybe you don't agree with 1% of what the military is doing. The solution is to elect different representatives. Libertarians recognize that there is a need to have a military to protect their individual rights and property from outside forces. Whether that military is publicly funded like it is now, or privately funded, however libertarians decide to go about that, it isn't responsible to one person's interest. So if you decide not to fund the military because you disagree with what it's doing, we are once again faced with the tragedy of the commons. If enough people decide they don't want to pay for a military, then it would fall apart. And all of a sudden, America would become Canada's 11th province. So, my dear, that is why you must pay for overseas baby killing, to keep the Socialist Republic of Canada from taking over the world. Well, that's it for part 2. I must say, I'm pretty disappointed. There were some legitimately good questions today, but more than anything else, I feel like I just got done responding to a BuzzFeed article. I don't know, what do you guys think? Leave a comment below. If you missed out on part 1, go check it out. I'll provide a link to that, and of course the original video in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great night.